The topic of this meeting, led by our friend Joe C., is how to start a new secular AA group or online community. Joe.
Thanks, Thomas. Hi, everybody. My name's Joe, and I'm an alcoholic.
Joe.
I got nothing to teach. This isn't going to be instructional. It's going to be experiential. If I do this right, I won't have to do too much. I'm going to get everybody involved. But I do want to share a little bit about my experience with being an AA group member, what it means to my sobriety, what it was like to start the first young people's meeting I started back in Montreal, what it was like to start the first agnostic meeting in Toronto with a bunch of my peers. Then this microphone up front, I'm hoping that you will sort of join in and again just share your own experience with what your home group means to you, or what it was like starting your group, any challenges you might have had, things that worked out great, anything you would alter or improve, just so that it's going to be more a discussion than a lecture. But just like there's an app for that, there's a pamphlet for that too. And I just want to read a small section in what is an AA group and talk to you about an interesting discussion going on a website called AA History Lovers right now about the history of this pamphlet, which has been around since 1965. But this says, as the long form of Tradition 3 states, our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover, nor ought AA membership ever depend on money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. Further clarifications of an AA group may be found in the 12 Concepts for World Service. Warranty 6 states, no penalties to be inflicted for nonconformity to AA principles. No fees or dues to be levied, voluntary contributions only. No member to be expelled from AA, membership always at the choice of the individual. Each AA group to conduct its internal affairs as it wishes, it being merely requested to abstain from acts that might injure AA as a whole, and finally, that any group of alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group they have no other purpose or affiliation. Some AAs come together as specialized AA groups for men, women, young people, doctors, gays and lesbians, and others. Hi, others. If the members are all alcoholics and they open the door to all alcoholics who seek help, regardless of profession, gender, or other distinction, and meet all the other aspects defined as an AA group, they may call themselves an AA group. Now, the interesting thing that's being discussed was I learned recently that I came to AA in the most permissive time in AA's history. Not before. You would know this too. Anyone from the sort of 70s generation would know this. Dogmatism that is normal to anyone who got sober in the 90s or this century is foreign to a lot of people who got sober at a certain era in AA. One of the things they were talking about is like open discussion meetings. So this pamphlet came out in 1965, and it's been amended many times as AA's mood changes. Some of our writings change. Some do not. Some do. In the whole sort of agnostic thing, coming from the 70s, having ingrown eyeballs, and sort of seeing AA through what I've always known without paying attention to the nuances of what's going on, I rolled into Toronto in 1985, and I thought, this program here has enough rules to run a small country. What's with these people? They need to loosen up. You know, they would have things like the speaker is to finish at exactly 8:45, right? And I used to joke, in Montreal, we said the speaker can talk as long as they like. We're leaving at 9, but they can go on talking as long as they like, right? I remember I was talking about the autonomy of groups and how the freedom of members to believe what they want, to say what they want, that nothing is sacred in an AA meeting. Nothing is forbidden in an AA meeting. And my partner, Lisa, said, "You can't do that. That's not what AA is." I go, "Yes, it is." And she goes, "No, it's not." And I go, "Yes, it is." And she was proven right, and I was proven to be historically correct. This is how the pamphlet read in 1965, and it reads slightly differently now. The AA group's pamphlet, open meetings, are for anyone interested. Among types of members, it also lists open discussion, noting that non-alcoholics may attend and participate in the discussion. That was normal. That was how AA was. That's what everyone knew AA to be in 1973. That's been amended. Some groups insist that if only alcoholics can participate. Some waive that rule for a medallion or a celebration because Al-Anons or members of the family might, or a group anniversary, they're in a church basement, the landlord, the preacher or priest might come and say a few words about having AA in their community. There is nothing sacred and there is nothing forbidden about how to run an AA meeting. One of my favorite sayings is, there are no rules in AA, and plenty of people lined up over here to tell you how they work. We all have a view of that. I got sober in Montreal in the 70s, and Montreal has that kind of double irreverence. The other thing that changed in this book is it included 12-step groups. There was no such thing as a 12-step group when this pamphlet was first printed in 1965. That was something that was added later in the 70s. When I got sober in Montreal, I moved to Calgary, Alberta for a while, and then I ended up in Toronto, Ontario, and there were big book meetings, and there were 12-step meetings, and I wasn't familiar with these. Many of the meetings focused on the book Alcoholics Anonymous, which I had not yet read at 9.5 years sober. In fact, I got interested in that book when I was given, for my 10-year anniversary, Pass It On. And I read about AA history, and I developed an interest in our original accounting of how the first members got sober and how we continue to get sober. Come on in, make yourselves at home. And in the AA, I got used to it. Wasn't every newcomer needs a big book. In fact, it took 40 years to sell our first 1 million big books, and then by 1990, AA was selling 1 million every year, and it became culturally connected that AA was the big book was the AA program. The sort of things that a lot of people believe and stand by, and their sobriety is solid, but that wasn't my experience. If we read something in an AA meeting, it was grapevine, it was living sober, it was came to believe. It was something written by someone still alive. Just seemed, why not, right? We got this stuff, let's read this stuff. I came to AA a complete phony. Now I'm a teenage alcoholic, so you got to understand that you've got to be a pathological liar to be an addict and alcoholic under the drinking age, right? You have to be able to walk into a bar and look like you work there, right? Walk into a liquor store and look like you were there just last week, right? Deal with, drug dealers and get out of problems and deal with conflicts and just like, so I lived this made up life. So coming to AA, it was really easy to learn the language and know how to fit in. I hid out in plain view. I said, my name's Joe and I'm an alcoholic. Not because this was some admission. I wasn't confessing, I was fitting in. If Thomas had said, my name's Thomas, and I'm a unionized pipe fitter, I would have followed with, my name's Joe, and I am a unionized pipe fitter. And I bet I would have passed the polygraph test. There are some members who are constitutionally, that could have been me. The language about higher powers or the language about alcoholism, you shake any family tree and a couple of drunks fall out of it, and mine's no different. I'm a second generation AA as well, and there are several of us around here. Bob Kay was supposed to co-moderate, but someone in his family got married, which I think is really insensitive. And so he couldn't be here, but he's like a second generation AA. We've got some in our home group, and I know many others. Kevin, who's going to be performing and singing later tonight, his dad was a member of the Pine Hills group in Scarborough for years. So I knew about AA before I had any interest in AA. I'd been introduced to Alateen, but had no interest in that. I thought they didn't drink in Alateen. I didn't know. But if you come from Alateen, that's, a lot of people's AA story ends in Alateen very badly. I'm not bad-mouthing Alateen. I never went. I just thought it was dry and, unattractive. Language about higher powers, especially in a town like Montreal, it was all taken with a grain of salt. That book, that's America. So really, it was just 2, 3, 4, 5 alcoholics around a table sharing their experience, strength, and hope. That's exactly what AA was, and any version thereof. It was very liberal. And I learned that it isn't that way in every town. When I went to Calgary, Alberta, they ran meetings differently. And I thought, how do they stay sober? They have different rituals, right? They read things that we didn't read. They left out things that are so important. Their customs were differently. I thought, how am I going to stay sober in this town? It was a smaller city. I was used to more speaker meetings. Here it was almost exclusively discussion meetings. It was a very different climate. And anywhere you get sober, you come into AA uncomfortable, then you get comfortable. Then you get exposed to some other AA, and that makes you uncomfortable. And that is fairly normal. So it's pretty easy for tribes in AA to think they've got it all wrong. Those back to basics people got it all wrong. Those agnostic people, they got it all wrong. Because what's working for them, there is no universal we in AA, but there is a perception of a collective consciousness or collective experience. But we are bound by common suffering. The solutions are as individual as our fingerprints in my own experience and opinion. Beyond Belief Agnostics and Free Thinkers group in Toronto isn't the first group I was ever a member of. I was a member of something called the Serenity Group in Montreal, in Saint-Denis-de-Bellevue, Quebec. And it was a Saturday night meeting, and I joined that meeting because, I don't know about you, but staying sober on a Tuesday, no hero biscuit. Staying sober on a Saturday, that's a challenge. So I joined a Saturday group, and I got active in the Saturday group. And you know what? They talk about, what makes people successful and what doesn't. They talk about sponsorship being important. I mean, our history bears out that it's the sponsoring that keeps people sober, not the being sponsored that keeps people sober. And for me, getting involved, I was a faker in AA. I was just telling you what I thought you wanted to hear. I could recite how it works like a performance, and the words meant nothing to me. Your reaction to it meant everything to me. I was just trying to win your approval so I could get along in my life. That was just how I operated. Whether you were the cool kids who liked Aerosmith, or whether you were the country and western or rockabilly types, I could fit in there. I could fit in with the punks. I could fit in at an AA meeting with people talking about the Second World War and dealing with Charlie, and anywhere. I was a chameleon. And so getting involved in my home group, I was making coffee, and then people came to me and they talked to me because I had the coffee pot. AA got me more than I got AA, and I became a member of the community. Then I joined a group and I got active. And like, if you find the God word a problem, they say it a lot less in the traditions. Go a little further into the concepts, they don't even mention it at all, right? I mean, AA service work is mostly secular. Really. I probably am at more AA service meetings than I am AA groups at many different times in my sobriety, because I tend to get active in committees like this. I've been involved in the International Young Peoples, and I've been involved in a lot of other things. I like that. It's way more interesting than the repetitive strain disorder of reading 164 pages over and over again. And I'm not bad-mouthing that as a means of getting and staying sober. It works for 1 million people, but there's another million that do it another way, and I'm just one of them. So when we started Beyond Belief, I said I would talk about online communities too, because there would be no well, there'd probably be an agnostic meeting by now, but this group that I'm a member of wouldn't have started had it not been for the online AA community. And that was a game changer for atheists and atheist alcoholics when we could communicate and we realized we were not alone. Now, my first online community was ICQ. Does anyone want my ICQ number if you want to communicate with me there? No? Okay. How about my MySpace page? Anyone still on MySpace? Okay, that's dead space now, but there were AA MySpaces. And the one thing I would say if you're thinking of starting an AA online community is be medium neutral, because these things are trendy. They come and they go. Yahoo groups. It was AAWR, AA Without Religion. I joined this group. I found out there was a directory of worldwide meetings in Washington and New York and Florida and all over the place. And I traveled, so I planned to go to those groups, and I did. And some of the people in my own home group, which were more liberal, I talked about, Toronto's going to love this. Well, I wasn't exactly right about that either. As a prognosticator, get someone else, really. I do a little bit of work in the finance business, and we won't admit we're wrong, and we say we're early with that prediction that the market is going to go up or going to go down. It was an early prediction, because it always changes, so you're always eventually right. And Toronto does love agnostic atheist AA, right? It isn't just the atheist agnostic members that make the Toronto community great. It's the vast majority of AAs that completely support us. And we can thank the people who are completely indifferent to us, because that's a healthy attitude to have about somebody else's meeting, complete indifference. But having coffee and talking about what they're doing at their meeting, we shouldn't do that, they shouldn't do that. If I do it, please remind me this talk was recorded. So what did we do when we started our meeting? So what was the format going to be? One of the contentious issues, do you read steps? If you read steps, are they going to be an agnostic version of the steps? Are you allowed to? Yes, you are. Is it controversial? Yes, it is. Will it draw hostility? Apparently. We did because we could. And we really wanted to, at the time, New York, the international sort of center of where AA meetings were, did have an agnostic version of the steps on there. And then I found a whole bunch of the B.F. Skinner, cognitive behavioral steps, and there were many other types. So we just made our own, and I didn't even care what they were, but I thought it was a good idea, right? Take out the word moral, sure, fine. Change this to that. Mindfulness instead of meditation. Okay, it doesn't matter. The great thing is, anyone who comes to our meeting and doesn't like it, if there's a word you don't like, and that word is preventing you from the life altering effect of AA, change the word. The word won't mind, and neither will we. I mean, I won't go into the history of the trouble that caused in Toronto, but it was temporary. Truth goes through 3 phases. First it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, then it's treated like, of course. And I think in a lot of corners we're very close to that. Well, of course, so what? Who cares? You think you're special? See you at the district meeting. So what I would like to do, so we did that, and I understand why it's controversial, and lots of groups don't. And if I was starting the 10th meeting in Toronto of agnostics and atheists, and someone was asking me, what do you think the program should be? It'd probably be quite different. I will steal a story from the We Are Not Saints group, and they were talking about what should the format be, and I said the only advice I have is it's easier to add something later than to take something away. Because Beyond Belief in business meetings has gone through, let's stop reading Appendix 2, the spiritual experience. It's too long. It bores me. I mean, no one's ever talking in a business meeting about what's best for the newcomer. I'm tired of that. 1/3 of the people voted to axe it. And then there was another motion to take out the steps completely. Let's just get on to discussion. And 1/3 of the people voted for that. So it's very hard to change something once it's in place. And so the wisdom of the We Are Not Saints group is they read the preamble, they ask for 3 topics, they write them down on a piece of paper and turn it around the room, and then they close with the responsibility declaration. The famous Whitby group closes with "see you next week." There are a bunch of scripts on the New York site. Some of them just close with "live and let live," right? There's just no wrong way to do it. Some people use a secular serenity declaration or a statement, much like the serenity prayer. So I would ask at this point, so that's a little bit about Beyond Belief. And the cool thing is, that was one group. We didn't know if it would last. We only rented the room for 3 months. And just as there were only 36 secular groups worldwide at the time that one started, and there are now over 400, in Toronto, the Toronto area, I think there are 15 meeting nights where you can go to a secular meeting. You can have a resentment at one and go find another. We have arrived, and it's great to see this gathering. I hope to see somewhere else. Let's go to Thunder Bay. Let's go to North Bay. Let's go to Ottawa. Let's go to Kingston or Hamilton or somewhere like that. That'd be great. It's an Ontario thing. Online communities also have no rules, right? And they can be run any way that people want to. So who wants to kick us off? This microphone is live. Just come up, tell us where you're from, what part of the world you're from, your home group, and what your experience is with your home group. And John will start us.
Hi, my name is John, and I'll preface my remarks. Both of these gentlemen have been to my home group, so they know how it works there. I only speak for myself. I don't speak for any other member of my group, so whatever I say is just on me. But I'm a member of the We Agnostics group in Washington, D.C. It's been in continuous operation since September 1988. I got sober in January 1987. And was just about on my last legs with this 12 steps bullshit when I arrived at the shores of We Agnostics in Washington, D.C. And our group was founded by 2 old-style American hardcore atheists, one of whom was from the University of Chicago, if you know that esteemed institution that had a reputation for being a hotbed of all kinds of interesting ideas back in the 1930s and 40s, and one of our founders came from that place. And these 2 folks saved my ass, because the summer before our group started, I've been very fortunate. I haven't had occasion to take a drink since I came into AA, but the summer before, I had just about had it with conventional prescriptive Alcoholics Anonymous, And I almost, very, very close, almost went out of my office at 23rd and Northwest and went right to my favorite bar that was still remaining at the time. My real favorite ones had already closed. But I was on my way to the Child Herald to order a Heineken with Jack Daniels back. All right? And for some reason, I stopped myself before I went out the door and I went to a meeting instead. But I was close because I just had heard enough of this horseshit. And I finally came to the conclusion that I needed something else. And like a miracle, out of the sky, you know, Maxine and Tom put an ad in our local newsletter, The New Reporter, and said that on September the 13th, or whatever date it was, I believe it was around then, that they would be having a meeting for people who are atheists and agnostics at this lady's apartment. The other founder, she had a beautiful place, a place called the Broadmoor, which I ended up living in later on. It's another long story. But we went to her beautiful place in Connecticut and Porter and had a meeting, and I immediately went like this. Because there was no 12 steps, there was no nothing except the AA preamble. Opened the meeting with an AA preamble, and they closed the meeting with an AA preamble. And there was nothing in between except the sharing of our experience, strength, and hope with our alcoholism. And it led me to the bedrock conviction that there are only three things of any significance whatsoever in Alcoholics Anonymous. That all the rest of this dressing up and talking and books and all, that's all bullshit, okay? There are only three things that matter in AA in the 30 years that I've been around. The first one is make a decision and don't drink. The second one is go to a meeting. And the third one is that whenever possible, you try to help another alcoholic. And if you do those three things, miraculously enough, you won't drink. And that's the only thing of any relevance whatsoever to me to this day. And if you come to our meeting, which at least two of you have, I know, maybe I don't know if anybody else in the room's ever been in DC, it's 11 o'clock at the Hill Center, very near Eastern Market Metro on Sunday mornings. You'll come into the meeting, and someone will read whoever's leading that day or moderating that day will read the AA preamble. We'll share our experience, strength, and hope. At the end of the meeting, they read the AA preamble again, done. And no one from any central office or any intergroup or anywhere has ever had a problem with us because we only use AA literature. Now, the only AA literature we use is the preamble. And you're not going to hear, I think I've maybe heard, in 30 years, I've only heard 2 discussions of the 12 steps in our meeting. Maybe 3. And even reference to the 12 steps. But you will hear a lot of people that have been sober a long time, and a lot of people that have been sober a short period of time, and people that come and have had slips, and people of all kinds and shades of beliefs. There'll be the militant atheists like me. There's a few of us around. There'll be the Buddhists. How do you know? Buddhists. There'll be the Buddhists. There'll be the the woo-woo secularists from Los Angeles that somehow managed to come to Washington. And we even recently we have a Christian member who comes literally. He goes to church on Sunday morning at a 9 o'clock service, and then he comes and sits with us because he doesn't want to hear about the steps in the meeting. He wants to hear about experience, strength, and hope. Okay? He literally comes. We laugh about it. He's an African American gentleman. He goes to a church right around the corner from us, and then he comes and sits with us. Why? Because he doesn't want to hear this other bullshit. Okay? So you may hear me mention that word bullshit once or twice today, and if you do, it's because of the following. And then I'll sit down. If someone had presented me with a list of the alternate 12 steps when I first came to an AA meeting that supposedly was for atheist agnostics, and excuse me for using language that's offensive, I would have used 2 words, okay? The first one was fuck, and the second one was you. And I would have gotten up and I would have walked out. Now that's just me, okay? There are a minority of people in our wing of the fellowship who are like that. I believe that we're probably a minority, but there are people who are like that. So if you hear me being vociferous, in this forum or others, if I live long enough, there'll be others. If not, somebody else will have to do it. That's the reason, because there are a percentage of people that I know for a fact have walked out of AA meetings and gotten drunk and ended their lives because they've been exposed to any version of the 12 steps. The only steps that have ever meant anything to me, step one, which I think was a critical genius that Wilson and Smith had. By the way, I'm schizophrenic on the subject because I just love Bill and Dr. Bob. We can talk about that later. You know, step one, which is essential. Step 10, which is save my dental work on occasion. Okay, because I tend to pop up now. And then this is 50% of step 12, right, which is helping another alcoholic, which is so centrally important and essential. The rest of it is first century millennial Christianity from the Oxford group. And I don't care how you dress it up or what you call it, that's what it is. I'm done.
Come on up. Jeff, anyone can just sort of line up here and get in the queue.
Go ahead.
No, just...
Hi, my name is Roger. I'm an alcoholic. I got a rehab in, I think it was April 2010. That's when it was, actually. And I started going to the traditional AA meetings in Hamilton, which is where I was living. And after 3 or 4 months, I thought I can't go to these meetings anymore. I simply can't go. And I was quite concerned because I thought I'd start drinking again. And somehow, accidentally, having gotten out in April, I ended up going to the Beyond Belief meeting in Toronto in August. And so I sit through the meeting, which is really one of the very first secular meetings in Canada. And when I came out of the meeting, I'm walking down the street, Bloor Street, I throw my hands up in the air and I say, I'm saved! Because that's how I felt. I felt this meeting works for me. This meeting works very well for me. And from 2010 to 2016, I went to that meeting. I lived in Hamilton. It would take me an hour and a half to get there, an hour and a half to get home. But I needed that meeting. And I also go to some of the other meetings. I go to the We Agnostic meeting that meet Larry once a week, or whenever I went to that meeting. I go to the We Are Not Saints meeting, and that Eric is involved in, and Sharon is a member of. And I love these secular meetings. So in 2016, in February, or a little bit earlier than that, I decided to start my own agnostic meeting in Hamilton. And I was kind of disturbed by the whole idea of starting it because I lived through what had happened in Toronto, and I thought, I don't want to live through this again. I don't want to deal with the rejection that was felt in Toronto. So I thought, well, I've got to try it. So I started the meeting, and I went to see the central office manager and said, can you put our meetings on the meeting list? And he said, you know, we really need to show Toronto the right way to do things. So we're on the meeting list. We're very well treated through our own We Agnostics meeting at Unitarian Universalist Church in Hamilton. I'd like to say that we started our meeting with 4 things. We started with the regular AA preamble. We also read the agnostic AA preamble. We read a secular version of the 12 steps. And I'll just throw in that the reason we do that is that I certainly agree with a line in Appendix 2 of the video that talks about a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. And I really do believe that personality change is essential to stop being an alcoholic. Now, you can use the steps, you can use the secular 12 steps, you can use CBT, you can use Buddhism, but you need that change in personality. And so we read a secular version of the 12 steps. And then we read an abbreviated version of Appendix 2, an edited version, because we also throw in the word she in the appendix. And some people say, well, why do you need all these readings at the beginning of the meeting? And the way I look at it, and the reason we do it, is that by the time those readings are done, you're settled down. You're ready for the AA meeting. We then do one of two things. We pick 3 topics. The group pick 3 topics, and then go around the table and share. Or there'll be a speaker who'll speak for 10 minutes. Sometimes we'll do a reading from Beyond Belief and go around the table and share. So diversity, very much a part of our meetings. And I must say, having started it, which I say was February 4th, 2016, now I go to them and then I'm on my way and think, oh, do I need another meeting? You know what? By the end of the meeting, I am just joyous. I just love the meeting. I love the sharing that goes on. And I always leave a better, stronger, happier person as a result of that secular AA meeting in Hamilton. So I'm going to conclude by saying, you're all invited to attend. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name's Tim. I'm glad I know I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Tim.
And I got sober the same year you did. And it's really nice to come here as a militant atheist who doesn't use the word miraculous, but also disagrees 100%. That's very important to me. You know, when I got here, I went to meetings. The first guy I saw that I knew outside of meetings, I asked to be my sponsor. He thought reading the book was a good idea and doing the steps. Problem was I was atheist. And, you know, I don't believe in this interventionist God, so it was a really hard thing for me to do. And where I'm from, where I first got sober, was Erie, Pennsylvania, and every meeting closed with the Lord's Prayer. So very early on, well, I'll back up just a bit before my response to that. When I got here because of cocaine. So when I introduced myself, I said, my name's Tim, and I'm addicted to alcohol and cocaine. And that pissed some people off. So I kept doing it. My opposite is at that time, if I didn't piss somebody off today, I wasted a day. An old timer took me aside, a guy named Gene Acre, and he said, Tim, it sounds like you're bragging about this cocaine thing. And I'm a bragger, but I wouldn't brag about that, it'd be stupid. So that's when I started to say my name's Tim, and I'm glad I know I'm an alcoholic, because it was important. And I've been saying that for 30 years now. And it's important. But the steps were also very important to me. The problem was, I'm in this Christian world of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I just had to learn to ignore it. But one of the ways I ignored it was I silent protest. At the end of the meeting, I got to the men's room first because I never stayed in the room for the Lord's Prayer. I didn't sit, hold hands, and be quiet. I left the room. And when people ask me why, this is what I said. I said that using the Lord's Prayer to close a meeting is the biggest lie, the continuous lie in AA. Have a higher power beyond understanding, but this is the way sober alcoholics pray. It just grated me. I had a brother named Pat who got to AA before it, and because of the religiosity in AA, he couldn't stay. And he ended up dying. He committed suicide a number of years after I got sober. As far as my experience with secular AA or non-traditional AA, I've been sober a long time, but I didn't even know you guys existed. And I had no idea. And one day, I live in Rochester now, but I was out on Long Island working, And I went to a meeting. And it just happened to be a meeting that was the right time, close to my hotel. And it was a free thinker meeting. I never heard of a free thinker meeting. I didn't know what it meant. And I was thrilled to find you guys. And about a year later, we started the free thinker meeting in Rochester. Shortly after that, we got 2 meetings in Rochester. And we close our meeting with thanks for coming. Okay? In the instructions to the chair, it says we close at 8 o'clock without fanfare, or prayer or fanfare. We're just glad we were there. But I am a 12-stepper. We created, and I want to, the reason I stepped up here was to thank Larry for suing AA. It's been very important to us. When we started our meeting, we read a version of the 12 steps that was published by This Ungodly Hour at 11 o'clock at night on Friday, Brooklyn meeting, and it's on AA Gnostic. Anyway, we were reading that, and then the AA police showed up and said that we couldn't do that if we wanted to stay on the intergroup's listing of meetings. Well, we thought it was more important to stay on that list, so we did. But then, Larry did, AA, you guys here in Toronto did for us. And we were able to take that information and go to the back of the trustees. But it was only one guy on the trustees that decided that we were going to be out. And we told them, we didn't ask permission, we just said we're going to start reading our own version of the 12 steps. And the very next meeting we had, we created our own version. And I brought a few copies if you're interested. But I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's done wonders for me and my family. Sober dads are better than a drunk dad. The sober, the ripple effect of being sober is tremendous. And the ripple effect of what you guys have done here, Larry particularly, I guess, was a sewer. That's a bad word, right? Sewer smell. The guy that did it for us. And I really appreciate that, and I think it's going to have a ripple effect through all of Alcoholics Anonymous. And just like women could be in AA now, and blacks could be in AA, and gays and lesbians, now we can be here too. How cool is that?
Keep the line moving. Thomas is going to close the meeting at 11:45 for a coffee break. But hopefully we can get through everybody here and anyone else who wants to share. We've got another 15 or 20 minutes.
Hi, I'm Dave B, and I'm an alcoholic from Ottawa. We have a secular group in Ottawa which has been going for about 2.5 years now. When I first came into AA about 10 years ago, I went through the program and never questioned anything about it. And it was of a huge, great benefit to me, the conventional AA. In the meetings, I used to say, I'm an agnostic, I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in a higher power, if high means an old guy up there. And I think in 10 years in Ottawa, I've never heard anyone express sentiments like that outside of the secular group that we founded a couple of years ago. Now, Ottawa is a pretty conservative place. It was never as bad as Toronto the Good, but it was still pretty bad. And I think this sort of conservatism has something to do with it. Anyway, the group was founded by Michelle D. a couple of years ago with 2 sidekicks, of whom I was one. What we do, and what we always have done, is that we do not read the 12 steps or any version of the 12 steps. Apart from that, it's a pretty conventional AA meeting, which does not proselytize about secularism. And what we've done is that we've been reading Living Sober, a chapter of Living Sober at each meeting, and then we discuss that, or anything else that people want to discuss. It's always gone down well. We haven't got any plans to change that. It's a flourishing group. There are 1 or 2 militant atheists in the group who are there because this is a secular meeting, but for the most part, It attracts people simply by word of mouth. They come sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes they just happen to need a meeting in a particular area of Ottawa and they come. I think the reason they stay is not so much that this is an agnostic group, it's because of the atmosphere of the meeting, which is much more relaxed and with much less, no pressure to conform to a particular view of AA or all of the particular views in AA. And that relaxed atmosphere is, I think, the main reason that people stay in the group. I think the way that the meeting is conducted, the particular things that we've chosen about the meeting that causes people to enjoy it and to keep coming back. Only one thing that I think that we have found useful, and it wasn't something that we planned, and it's the fact that professional alcoholism counsellors in Ottawa, many of whom of course are AA members, they have realised that there is a secular group in Ottawa, so when they get newcomers who are undergoing treatment, who said, you know, all the God stuff, I can't stand that sort of stuff, they actually direct people to our own secular group. If anyone really needs any advice, I don't think many people do, but if you do, I think that's an important thing to cultivate in the community, so that you get people who do not discover the place by accident, they're actually put in that direction, you know, as alcoholism counsellors do. It's just that they see what sort of people that they have in treatment and they direct them to the secular meeting. Thanks.
I'm an alcoholic, my name is Carol.
Hi, Carol.
I'm a member of the LDA in Toronto and in Mississauga. I struggled for about 8 years in regular meetings. I wasn't an out atheist because I didn't feel that I would be accepted if I said that to the people in those meetings. So I suffered for a long time and kept relapsing and just couldn't get there. My instinct was I need to feel connected to people, and I didn't feel connected to people. I found out about the agnostic meetings in Toronto through the publicity about the issues with the Toronto groups. It took me 2 years to get to Toronto, and I walked into that Toronto meeting, and other people have said this. I felt, oh my God, this is it. I felt at home immediately. I can't even explain what that feeling was, but I knew that this was going to work for me. I came into that meeting and I said, okay, I'm from the Wild West of Mississauga, which is, some of you may not know, a city just to the west of Mississauga. And I said, I'm here to find out where I can go to Mississauga for meetings. And everybody looked at me, Joe, I think, said, well, you're going to have to start one. I said, that's not the answer I want. I want to find a meeting already there. It took about 2 years, I guess. The agnostic site had a little button, icon, whatever, that said, you want a meeting in your community, or your town, I guess it was. And in January of 2015, someone popped up and said, I'm from Mississauga. So I was put in touch with that person. February 11, 2015, we started the Mississauga meeting. It was a huge, roaring success. The one person came in who had found us through the Toronto Agnostics AA website, which is a pretty simple just listing of the meetings in the GTA at that point. So that's, you know, my message is how to get the word out. That's a really important thing. At this point, I've moved back to Toronto, so I'm not able to go to Mississauga as often, but it's still, near to my heart. I just want to say a word about service. Through those 8 or so years in regular AA, I got myself into a lot of service work, and that kept me sober. I don't know how that works. I don't know how service keeps you sober, but for me it worked. I'm now very involved in, you may ask, what is this t-shirt? The International Conference of Secular AA, which is being held in Toronto next year. So I'm an unabashed plug for that. We're taking registrations in the other room. So anybody interested in that, come and talk to me or anyone with a t-shirt on, right there. Thanks.
Thanks, Carol.
Do I have a minute or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't take long. My name's Martin. I'm an alcoholic.
Oh, hi, Martin.
I'm from Kingston, Ontario. Don's from the same area, from Odessa. I just wanted to say a word about our experience and my personal experience in Kingston. I've been around AA for about 25 years. I've been sober for over 20. And believe it or not, I was a member of Thursday Night Big Book group, which read this in 164 pages over and over and over again. And the reason I stuck with it was I felt I had no alternative. And A, and B, I love the people. I love the way they were so kind to me and so sharing. And there was certainly a certain amount of, well, unquestionable, but it was a reasonably liberal group. But about 3 years ago, I was, trying harder and harder to find my higher power. And since I come from an atheist background and I'm now a scientist who has no need of the hypothesis of God, I struggled with this for years, and I thought I was deficient, that somehow I was supposed to find a higher power. Eventually, I remember the day very vividly. I said to myself, I've been sober, I'm living a good life, there's nothing wrong with my life. I don't believe in God. And I felt this enormous wave wash through me, just like the Christians talk about there too. And I realized I don't have to believe in God. I don't have to have a higher power. AA can work just as well for people that don't believe that an interventionist God is plucking things out of their brain. So and it coincidentally, Dawn, who's in the corner there, it also from the Kingston area, another university here, we were talking about helping a colleague who was asking me to help a colleague who was an alcoholic. And we started talking. Dawn said, I think I realized that I'm an atheist. I said, so am I. And Dawn said, I'm thinking of forming a group. And I said, yes, let's do it. And so independent of what was happening here, we started talking about it. Then we went online, at least I went online, discovered these great websites like AA Agnostica, and certainly the online experience gave me tremendous hope. I began to read books by people that had exactly the same experience as me, realized I wasn't alone. And so Dawn and Dennis, who can't be here, he just had open heart surgery, but is recovering well, we believe. And Dennis, by the way, is not, I would not say he's an agnostic or atheist. He just believed that we should have groups that allow that sort of thing to continue. He was open-minded enough to realize that. So we formed a group then. There's a long story behind what happened in Kingston. We got tremendous pushback from the district. We barely managed. We got ourselves on the website before really the whole district realized we were on. They tried to kick us off. They got almost 2/3 of the votes needed to kick us off, but not enough. There was a moratorium declared to allow us to stay on. And in the interim, before that moratorium ended, thank goodness for Larry's hard work and the people in Toronto, the settlement that was here made it very clear we had enormous power to come back to any people who tried to bring it up. So when it was brought up again, we had enormous ammunition to prevent this happening. And I think because of all of this, Dennis and others are rewriting the district's standards. They're putting in human rights into the district procedures, and I think it's going to have a tremendously beneficial effect on the district. We still have our opposition, but we also have people that have come to our meetings and love what's going on despite their initial antagonism. So we now have 3 meetings, 2 groups, and an additional meeting in Kingston. The formats are typically that we do have the 12 steps. I am also a believer in the general principles of the 12 steps. I think that they're the process of self-examination and that sort of thing is very beneficial. So one of our groups, the original group, we read literature that's related to AA. For example, we read the book Waiting. We've read the book Alternative 12 Steps. We read Living Sober. We're probably going to read one of the books now that's trying to rewrite the big book in modern parlance. And so we found it enormously interesting, and there are a lot of old-timers there. Their experience is enormous in helping us to interpret the AA program in, for me, such a revolutionary new way. I agree with everybody who says, when I go to that meeting, I just love it. I'm home. And people that have joined our group who are agnostics or atheists say that they would not be in AA if it weren't for the existence of our meetings, and they become sober because of them. Another group continuously reads the alternative 12 steps, and a third group we read from Joe's book each week and then discuss what's in there. And we end with the responsibility declaration. So it's been a struggle, but I think I have learned so much about the AA program by the experience. So even though it was a bit of a struggle, if you're thinking of forming one, I think the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks. So thank you.
I'm one who, in my 45th year of recovery, still has a problem with limits and direction. So I'm going to ask if you stood in line for a long time. Please come up. We need some estrogen at this point.
Arlena, alcoholic. Don't want to keep you guys, but yeah, I started a meeting in North Bay, Ontario about 3 months ago. And
Beautiful.
I shouldn't have come up here, I'm so emotional. Anyway, it's going really well. Basically, all I wanted to say was that we didn't have as many barriers as far as, like, I thought we wouldn't be welcome at this church and stuff like that. We haven't had barriers in that sense, but personally, there's been a lot more barriers than I expected. Lost a lot of people that I thought were my friends, and, you know, people would announce the meeting and everyone would you know, make a face and whatever. But I'm so thankful that I've had, you know, the whole agnostic community behind me, because whenever things are difficult, you know, it just really helps know there's people that believe in you. When it feels like an entire city is telling you you're going to fail without God. So just wanted to say thanks, and we're all doing a really important thing here. And I do believe that agnostic AA will save my life. So.
Thank you. I'm also going to take the chairperson's prerogative to have Life come up very briefly for a comment.
Yeah, I'm Life, I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Life.
I couldn't stand over there for a half hour, so I just kept sitting here. But one thing about the reading of the 12 steps, if they won't let you do it, or if you don't want to deal with it, just take those 12 numbers out of there and you can read whatever you want. That's all it takes. That is not the 12 steps anymore. You're not reading the 12 steps that are wrong. So that's what we do. Anyway, other than that, if you want to read about our meetings and the don't try. But anyway, that's it. I think we should try and have some kind of procedure where we don't have to stand over there for a half hour to get to talk, because I can't do it. So.
Thanks, Life. So that's it. We're going to now break for coffee, and I'm going to end this meeting the way that I learned how to end a meeting, a secular meeting in Maui, Hawaii, by Rich H. And they end their meetings by saying, zippity-doo-dah.